This is a Beyond Barriers Unscripted podcast, episode 26.
Blindness is a spectrum. It's not simply seeing versus not seeing.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Randy Owen, and in this episode, I am joined by my co-host, Brandie Kubel. We sit down and have a conversation with the CEO and founder of Bold Blind Beauty, Stephanae McCoy. Now, Brandie, how did you find out about Steph?
I came across a post that Roy Samuelson had posted, and I followed the link over to Bold Blind Beauty and started reading her content. One of the most recent that I can remember from last year was a portrait of Kirk Adams, who I was in contact with when he was up in Seattle at Lighthouse for the Blind. And I thought, I really just need to learn more and more and more, and just started reading more and more, and then started listening to her podcast early in the year. And I was looking forward to learning more about her as a person.
Before we get started, I'd like to ask that if you enjoyed the show, to please consider hitting that subscribe button and sharing with a friend. If you have any questions or comments or ideas for the show, or you just want to reach out to myself or Brandie, we can be reached at bb.unscripted@gmail.com. And now our conversation with Stephanae. So you're a podcaster. You're the founder of Bold Blind Beauty. You're a motivational speaker. How would you describe yourself without using an official title?
That's a good question. The way I typically describe myself is being an intensely focused, introverted creative. I am now, and I've always been, very passionate about social justice, but I really didn't understand how that came to be until I did a lot of self-reflection, which introverts are pretty good at doing. And I think, in looking back, I've always had sort of a real great sense of what was fair and what wasn't fair, in regards to people, and just a heart for it, really. So all of these little qualities and quirks that I have all balled up just makes me who I am today. And quite honestly, in earlier days, I used to really just not like it, because I thought that I didn't fit in. I felt like just an outsider, just different. But now it's those same those same traits that I embrace within myself. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Follow-up question. What is your official title?
My official title with Bold Blind Beauty is founder. I was working with someone very closely a few years ago. She passed away in 2019. We became really great friends. And the funny thing was, I never met her in person, but she was a communications professional, and she was helping me revamp the Bold Blind Beauty website. And she was telling me, she said, Steph, you need to identify yourself as a CEO, because people really respect, the CEO title. And I said, I respect that, but I just don't feel like a CEO. But I went along with it. And I had these business cards printed up, and it said founder and CEO. The founder was first, and I felt okay with that, but I still felt very uncomfortable with the CEO title. And I have since removed that title, because it's just not me. It just doesn't feel genuine to who I am. I feel very comfortable being the founder. I think that's quite enough.
So going back just a little bit, if you don't mind, Can you share with us and with our listeners a little bit about Stephanae and your blindness journey?
Sure. My blindness journey began completely out of the blue. I was in my mid 40s, working full time. I worked at one of the big four accounting firms. And I remember coming home that day like I did any other day after work. And I went up to my bathroom, took out my right contact lens. And after doing so, I looked in the mirror and half of my face was gone. And I was looking at that and I'm like, oh, this is kind of bizarre. I couldn't understand why that would happen, but I thought that it was medication that had, recently been changed as opposed to a physical eye situation. So I called my doctor the next day and I said, I think this new medicine that you put me on is causing some effects because I'm having some trouble, seeing out of my left eye. And they said, no, you need to see an ophthalmologist immediately. So I did. I made an emergency appointment and they told me, the guy was so serious, I'll never forget it. He pulled up his rolling chair to me and he said, I'm so sorry to tell you that, what you have is a macular hole. It's, destroying your central vision and there's just nothing that we can do about it. But he said, I'll refer you to a retina specialist. 4 years, a span of 4 years of this. That's how it began with just one macular hole. It happened not only in that eye, the surgery didn't fix it. I had to have the surgery repeated, which was pretty gruesome. It was called a vitrectomy. It's where they go in, they inject a gas bubble into the eye. You have to keep your head down for about a week or so typically, but in my case, I had to keep it down for, I think it was 3 weeks the first go round. But once the bubble had dissipated, the sight wasn't restored. It was worse. So he had to go back in like 6 months later, and that surgery did take. And oddly enough, my retina specialist told me that all the numbers were in my favor. I was young. He said that, when he initially examined me, the hole wasn't very big, but when they went in, it was much bigger than what they thought it was. But nothing went according to plan. It happened in that eye a couple of times. Then I had it happen in my good eye. I had retinal tear that required emergency surgery. I developed cataracts, glaucoma, uveitis, and now it's to the point today where I can no longer see the eye chart. Obviously, I haven't seen the eye chart in years, but they measure my residual sight by hand waving or finger counting. So
I can relate to that. My ophthalmology visits were like that. Yeah.
Oh gosh, it's gruesome, isn't it? It's just such a...
Well, the interesting thing is I've always been legally blind. So okay. I didn't lose a lot. I didn't go through that process, the grieving process, like a lot of people do. And now that I work in the community, I see it and, and I hear it and, you're just there to kind of hold that person's hand to just let them know they're not alone. And it kind of leads me into the next thought here. When I never knew any blind people. Okay, I've been legally blind my whole life. I kind of felt that, whatever. And when I started working at Society for the Blind, I met Brandie, and Brandie became one of my first friends that was blind. And I noticed changes in my attitude about myself. Coming into the blind community, have you experienced something similar, or what's your experience been if you were to reflect on yourself?
Oh my gosh, that is such an excellent question. And one of my favorite ones, actually, because it was the blind community that saved me to some degree. Because the first thing I did, as you know, having gone through the experience, doctors will tell you once they reach that point where you reach the legal blindness stage, we're sorry, but there's no more we can do for you. They put a period at the end of that sentence. They should put a comma and say, however, we can, do these other things, refer you to low vision specialists and, rehab and just all sorts of resources. But that didn't happen for me initially. So I ended up looking for like a support group or something. There wasn't one of those. I even went for therapy. I couldn't find a blind therapist, but I did, talk with someone who was sighted. But I wanted somebody who could identify with what I was going through. So I called this group called the Golden Triangle Council of the Blind, which is they're part of the American Council of the Blind. It's like our local chapter. Of course, our state chapter is the Pennsylvania Council, but I called them and I met some friends that a lot of them became mentors and just really great friends who were so instrumental in helping me see that just because I could no longer see, that didn't mean that my life was over, that I can continue to live and I could thrive. I was watching these people, these advocates. I mean, these people are totally, I hope I can say this here, badass.
That's fine. It is what it is, man. If they're badass, they're badass.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, they were totally bad. And I looked up to them and I'm like, well, if they can do it, I can do it. And I felt like I found my place. Even though I still feel like I'm straddling both worlds, sort of sighted and blind, because I'm not fully blind. I'm not fully sighted.
I know that
yeah,
one.
that's another one, right?
Yeah, that was the first half part of my life was, straddling that world. And it's the challenge for so many of my students and so many people out there. It's at times I say it's harder and I'll be critiqued. But sometimes it's harder than just losing it completely. And I say this as a totally blind person today. I have no light perception. I was actually thankful when the light perception was gone, because the roller coaster of the, is the lighting okay? Is it perfect in here? I have to wait a minute. I have to adjust. I've just come in from outdoors to indoors. It's just that constant up, down,
right.
up, down, up, down is harder than.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I tell people all the time, I can't say that because obviously I have some residual sight. So total blindness is not my story.
Totally agree with you.
But to hear you say it or to hear other friends of mine say it, it just sort of validates where those of us who have residual sight, where we're at, and how hard it is to navigate the world being partially sighted. And then you get the whole thing from people saying, well, you don't look blind.
Oh,
yeah, you look like you can see. Why do you need that?
It looks like you can see. Yeah.
How are you using your phone? How do you get dressed? How do you put on your makeup?
Which perpetuates the fear of taking the cane, because then you're going to be accused of faking it or accused of being something you're not. And it's a vicious cycle. And it's like the sighted world, they don't understand. They really don't. And how do we make them understand when a lot of blind people don't understand?
We don't understand. I'll be the first to admit I don't understand.
Yes. Oh, this is such a vital conversation. And that's one of the things I love about your podcast. You have that conversation in such a genuine, approachable manner. It's like I'm talking to the YouTube going, yeah. And I'm jumping in too. I want to jump into the screen, like I'd be part of the conversation.
Well, you know what? We have to have you on the podcast so that we can have that conversation, because that's what we really are aiming to do. Everything, from the inception of Bold Blind Beauty to the podcast, which we just started this year, is really all about, inclusion and Bold Blind Beauty. As a follower of Bold Blind Beauty, you probably know our mission is very broad, but it's intentional. Improving humanity by changing the way we perceive one another. When you break it down and think about it, and think about how we relate to one another as people, and we always have these sort of preconceived notions about people without really knowing them, it's so unfair, And I think there were a lot of reasons why I wanted to create it. One of the main reasons, Brandie, was for the reasons that we were just talking about, to increase the awareness of blindness and what it looks like, because blindness is a spectrum. It's not simply seeing versus not seeing. And I wish I could get the majority of the population out there who wears eyeglasses to sort of understand that, because I think people who wear eyeglasses, they get it. When you take off your glasses, you can't see, right? The world's not in focus. But it's almost like, I don't know. I just don't know what it is. Maybe it's because of the word blind and the way we define it, and that's what has people just so confused about what it is. I really don't know, but I do know one of the things that we've done recently at Bold Blind Beauty, we even tackled that. We took the word blind.
I saw that.
Did you see that?
I saw that last night. I love it. I'm going to buy one of the coffee cups, actually. I love it. Yeah.
I love it. Tell us about
it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but yeah.
That's okay. This is good. This is really good. So the word blind at Bold Blind Beauty stands for bold leaders illuminating new directions.
And you can get a coffee cup with that on.
Awesome.
Yes. You can get a T-shirt with it.
I like the T-shirt too.
I'm going to be putting some crew necks out there with the bigger logo. Now, the V-neck shirts have the smaller, design on the left of the V, which is cool. I actually love a V-neck shirt, and
I do too.
Oh my God, the shirt is so nice and soft, and it has those cutout tabs at the bottom of the hem. I can't remember what the real term is called, but it's so comfortable. And it's made of recycled materials. So, it's keeping, the environment.
Environmentally friendly.
Yes. And environmentally friendly. And I just love saying bold leaders illuminating new directions. Every time I say it, it just fills me with a sense of pride and joy, and just being a part of this community, because as all of us on this podcast recognize, because we're blind doesn't mean we don't add value or that we're not valuable. We can do so very many things, and a lot of things we can do better, almost better than sighted people, because we're not distracted by, the visual.
You just said something, and it made me think, as you go through the process, obviously you've gained something through this journey. If you had to pick one thing that you've gained spiritually, personally, professionally, however you want to define that, what would you say it is?
I see more clearly today than I've ever seen. Seeing isn't just a physical thing with the eyes. For me, I think it has more to do with the heart and soul. And, even seeing people, like most of the people that I connect with and have connected with since starting Bold Blind Beauty, even before the pandemic, was virtually. Many of these followers that I've connected with are virtually. And some of them I have had the honor of meeting in person. And they're just awesome people. And it's like, I knew it instinctively, I knew these people were good people. I got to go to Utah to a women's retreat for blind and low vision women a couple of years ago. And the leader of that retreat, Becky Andrews, she is just as beautiful in person as she is online. And I just knew it, because I could see her.
That's awesome. It's really easy to present a persona on the internet, and it's got to be really nice to actually know that that's an authentic person.
It really is. And on the flip side, I don't like to go negative, but I can even detect people that aren't so genuine,
Do you think
people.
that is because you're just more paying closer attention? It's not
could
like
be.
People always say, "Oh, you must have incredible hearing." Well, no, it's just that I pay closer attention because I don't want to get hit by a car.
Right.
I'm not Spider-Man. I don't have spidey senses.
Wouldn't that be cool?
Can I just throw it out there? I'm not Spider-Man. I don't have spidey senses. I wish I did.
She does try to throw cobwebs in the office, though. No.
I do. It never works, man. But I'm just paying closer attention, hopefully, so I don't get mowed down.
Right. Well, I was just telling someone I was doing an interview the other day, and I was telling them, I feel quite good in my environment, my personal environment at home. But the moment I walk out of my door, I'm on high alert, constantly, because we have to be, because you just don't know what's going to be coming at you,
Yeah, literally.
So was there a career change? Can you talk about, was there some reinvention with this? How did you come up with this idea? I know the world's changing today, and especially since COVID's happened, a lot of us are working from home. Social media has just become these platforms that we have to use if we're going to reach people. And you kind of have to use them intertwined. You don't just have a website, you've got a podcast, you've got a YouTube. Can you talk about that process, what it takes, your team behind you, and how that's developed?
So yes, I was working. My job, the place where I worked, Deloitte, was amazing in how they supported me. They gave me anything and everything I could have possibly asked for in regards to the tools and resources that I would need to continue doing my job. But, when you lose your sight out of the blue, you don't know what you need, because you don't know what you don't know. And I really didn't know. It was a friend of mine who was legally blind who told me about Zoom text. So that was the first thing I got. And I figured it out a lot on my own, but it wasn't until I had a VRT come in and help me really get into the meat of it and make it work so that I could work a little more seamlessly. I just did the best I could. And I was always such a hard worker. I have a very insane work ethic where I would just give like 100, all of me to whatever it was I was doing. But there had to be some changes. They got me a huge screen, a monitor that I could use at work and at home, because we were set up where we could work from home as well. Not full time, but, certain days of the week we could work from home. I had to learn how to reuse some of the other things that, I needed to do my job. Knowing what I did and being able to interact with my team at work was something that really didn't change, because everybody knew me and I knew them. It was just I had to learn to adapt to doing things a little bit differently. So when I began this process of losing my sight and I connected with the Golden Triangle Council of the Blind, I was introduced to the Pennsylvania Council, and they immediately wanted me to join some committees. So I did that. And next thing you know, I was leading at least one, the Low Vision Committee, and I can't remember what the other one was, but it had to do with advertising and stuff. And because of my connections at Deloitte with our graphics department, I was able to have things made that we needed to help to promote the organization. So that was really cool. But I was asked to speak at the Pennsylvania Council of the Blind's convention to a group of blind women about how to apply makeup as a blind woman. And when I was asked to do that, I said, but I don't know if I'm qualified because I'm still new to this, sight loss thing. And I'm still learning myself. So I did research. Unfortunately, back then, there wasn't hardly anything online about how to apply makeup as a blind woman. The only article I came across was on visionaware.org. And if memory serves, I think it's still out there, but it was very helpful. So I actually had to make this stuff up on the fly. And I chose products and things that I felt would be easier to use, especially for people who were new to makeup or just wanted to try to, learn from the ground up, as opposed to someone who has been using makeup, for a while or knew anything about it. So that's what I did. I created my own process. And at the end of that talk, there were a lot of questions. So that sort of let me know that there was an interest in this area. And that was one of the reasons why I created Bold Blind Beauty. But I also, it was also sort of self-serving at the same time because, I was still working. I was using my cane. I was dressed nice. I had on makeup, but people would always ask me questions, or I knew that they wanted to. You know how you can have that feeling like people are looking at you, like you're standing at the deli or something.
Go ahead and ask. It's okay.
Yeah. It's just. And so I thought I really need to address some of these issues, and I thought sharing my story would help me to do that, to bring about some of this awareness. But then magically, as the site has evolved, and as you mentioned, Brandie, I found that connecting with more people within the community and sharing their stories, because all of our stories are different, that just made it more colorful, and it allowed people to see a wide variety of blind people living and thriving with sight loss across the spectrum.
You referred to yourself as a creative earlier at the beginning of the interview.
Yes.
Has that changed?
No. I am definitely a creator or creative. I always have been, even as a child. I loved arts. I loved arts and crafts. I've tried nearly everything from embroidery to crochet to knitting to just working with my hands, building models. When my kids were little and they would have projects at school, I was a good parent. I helped my kids. They tell a different story. They say that I actually took over their projects. But I loved it. I remember building a coliseum for my son out of sugar cubes and then spraying it with this textured like stuff to make it look like stone. I was so proud of that. But yeah, I'm a creative, definitely.
So you build an organization, you have a podcast, you have an online store. Take a minute to tell us about your contact information, but where I want to go with this is so you build something, and most creative people want to keep doing something more. So do you have that need, and how do you fulfill that?
Yes, actually, I do. I mean, when Bold Blind Beauty first started, it was just a simple blog. I knew that I wanted to monetize it, but I didn't know how. And at the time, I was working with a counselor who was telling me, you have to have a business plan. You have to have this, you have to have that, and you must do this. And that just wasn't working for me. And I more or less told her, no, I have to do it this way. So creating Abby, she's on the website. She is the brand icon. She's very fashionable. She wears white heels and she uses a white cane. She's my alter ego. Okay. That was sort of like the beginning.
Got it.
That was sort of the beginning.
Okay.
She's on a lot of the products.
She's on the t-shirts.
Yes.
Yeah.
She is.
Yeah. Yep. And I was wondering who Abby was.
Yes.
It's like,
and she has a total backstory. Her whole name is Abigail, not spelled like the regular Abigail, Abgail. It's Abigail, Abigale. The reason being, Abby, the first part of her name, is for abilities, because we focus on abilities. Gale is part of the nightingale. The nightingale bird is a small, ordinary brown bird. To look at it, you would think, oh, what a ordinary bird. But this bird has the most amazing singing voice, the sweetest voice. And again, it's about changing perceptions. Just because something looks a certain way really isn't, that's meaningless. You know, we have to understand the story. So the way people can get in contact with me, number one, the site, boldblindbeauty.com. Across social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, it's Bold Blind Beauty. YouTube, Bold Blind Beauty. And our podcast, Bold Blind Beauty on Air, is on nearly every podcast platform that there is out there. It's hosted on Buzzsprout, but you can access it from many different points. And we even upload episodes to our YouTube channel as well.
I've heard you use the acronym A.I.R. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, I can. I'm so excited to tell you about that. A.I.R stands for access, inclusion, and representation. Initially, we used the word accessibility, but to your point, Randy, when we talk about evolving and growing, as we were thinking about it, as I was thinking about it, I'm like, I think access is broader. Access includes accessibility. So I like the idea of access and opening doors. So we changed the A in A.I.R to access. But what we say at the top of our podcast is something to the effect that everybody on the planet needs air to survive. People with disabilities need air not only to survive, but to thrive. And in this case, air is access, inclusion, and representation. We must be able to see ourselves in every area of life, you know, not just certain specific areas. It has to be real. It has to be authentic, not what people think or wish or, you know, whatever the case may be. It has to be, we have to see a real representation of who we are as people. And we must be included in companies from top to bottom. If that were to happen in the ideal world, if that were to happen in every company, we wouldn't be having these conversations because everybody would be exposed to people with disabilities on some level.
It came up when we were talking with Roy, and there's a phrase or there's a hashtag, nothing about us without us.
Yes.
And that led us into, and access and inclusion made sense, but when you hit me with representation, it's like, yes. Can you talk about, our responsibilities of people in the BVI community, as far as being aware of what we're projecting out there in public, how we're representing ourselves as a community?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As a community, in a way, I feel like that's a little general and a little complicated maybe to navigate. As a community, I would like us to band together to amplify our voices in a positive way. Saying that, though, there are many, many different ways to advocate. I don't think, I may not disagree with every way that everybody does their advocacy, but that doesn't mean that they're wrong in the way that they're doing it.
Or that it's not valid.
Exactly. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. Thank you for that, Randy.
I totally agree with you, Steph.
I know that was a hard question, but
a good one.
Yeah.
I feel the same way. We can all have varying opinions, but we all have to work for the same goal, which is inclusion and representation and really advancing our purpose.
Right. And we can do that being respectful of the differing opinions. There's no reason really to tear other people down just because they don't see things the same way that I might see things. Like you said, Randy, it comes down to valuing, that person's work. And if they're not hurting themselves or hurting anybody else or hurting the movement, then, we need to try to support that. And really what Bold Blind Beauty tries to do, we really try to support others within the community by lifting them up and bringing attention to them and the work that they're doing. Because it's not just about us.